I want to start by acknowledging the work of my colleague Senator Steele-John. And I know he hasn't been doing this alone, but in this chamber, in some regards, he's been doing it alone. The person with the lived experience who understands what these cuts will mean for people with disability in this country, who is deeply connected with the millions of Australians who try to get by every day in a system that wants to exclude them and marginalise them. But I've got to tell you this. My colleague, Senator Steele-John, has done this work with immense courage and immense dignity and immense strength, and our party is grateful for the leadership that he has shown. But imagine if that leadership had been shown by the Prime Minister. Imagine if that leadership could be shown by whoever the hell it is leading the coalition today. Imagine if that leadership could be shown by the government. What would that leadership mean? Well, that leadership might mean that those gas lobbyists who are wandering through these halls, well, maybe they get stopped at the door for once of the Prime Minister's office. Maybe they get turned around and they get sent out through the security screens and they get sent out into the cold of a Canberra winter. And maybe instead of them getting a warm cup of tea and a private meeting with the Prime Minister, maybe those gas executives get an export tax. Maybe they get a 25% gas export tax, like my colleague Senator Hodgins-May has been pushing for. And those gas execs may go out into a cold Canberra winter, sad that their donations didn't get them what they wanted, sad that they'd be paying a third of what Norway's gas exports pay on tax. But, you know, maybe after they got shown the door, maybe people with disability could have been brought into the Prime Minister's office, like they go into Senator Steele-John's office, like they come into my office. And maybe when they'd come in, if there'd been that leadership, the Prime Minister could have said to them, well, we made a choice today. I made a choice. And I made a choice to tax obscene fossil fuel profits that are blood-soaked from a war in Iran. We're spending that money on your support, the support you need, the support your kids need. Imagine if that kind of leadership had been shown. Could you imagine what that would demonstrate to this country right now at a time when politics is considered to be just utterly demeaned by corporate money, running to short-term polls, running to this kind of lowest common denominator? Could you imagine what a different pathway would be open if that's how our politics works? If the gas lobbyists, the fossil fuel lobbyists, the gambling lobbyists, the defence industry lobbyists, imagine they had the door shut on them, and imagine the people who need help in this country had the door opened. Could you imagine how much that would inspire people into what politics could do? If they actually saw these decisions being connected. And then, instead of a set of talking points or an endless political fight on Mellongate or half promises or gaslighting the disability community, instead of that, people could say, well, do you know what, I was really despondent about politics. I was really worried that it was just here for vested interests, but I've watched the government and they've redirected money from arms manufacturers into Medicare. Bloody hell. My kid got to see a doctor like that. Didn't cost me anything. Politics is good. Or imagine if people with disability suddenly had these cuts taken off them and they were told the way this is happening is politics finally stood up to these big vested interests and the donors, the gambling interests, the fossil fuel interests, and we taxed them and we put them in their place and we found the money for you because you need it for your life. Imagine how different politics would be if there was that kind of leadership. But instead, this week, millions of people across this country, fearful of what these cuts will mean for them and their families and their loved ones and their neighbours and their work colleagues, are watching a different kind of politics. The ones that they're so used to now. They're watching an ugly Canberra deal between these two political parties that keep pretending they're fighting, the Coalition and Labor. They keep pretending they're fighting, but they just have the same interests. These two parties, no doubt with the cheering support of their One Nation mates, are coming in here and saying, don't look at the gas companies and the billions and billions and billions of dollars they're stealing from the public by selling our public resources at wartime record profits and paying no tax. Don't look at them. Look at people with disability. They're the people who are attacking our budget. We can't afford to have, keep supporting people with disability. Have you seen how much the NDIS cost the other day? Gee, it almost costs as much as the gifts we're giving the gas lobby. And Labor and the Coalition, cheered on by One Nation, have been meeting in dark rooms in this place, cutting the deal to drive 160,000 people off the NDIS, cutting the deal to take billions and billions of dollars away from support so that people with disability can go shopping, can have a weekend break, can get the help from the physio when they need it, can be a part of our society. That's what's been ripped away here. And the fact that it's been done in a grubby deal, and no doubt they're going to roll in a bit of gambling grubbiness into the deal as well and bundle it together as some kind of sensible, essential financial reform and try and sell it to the public as, we needed to do this because we can't afford to help people with disability. The NDIS thing's got out of track. It's got out of whack. Turns out there are more people who need help than we thought, and we're not going to do it. This is legislation that at its core smashes human rights. It just smashes human rights. An acting deputy, that's why I'm going to move a second reading amendment and omit all words after that and instead have the question before this House as follows. The Senate rejects the bill and A, notes that there are serious concerns that this bill undermines the rights of disabled people. And the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights warned that the cumulative impact of the measures in the bill may constitute a significant interference with the rights of people with disability, the rights of the child, and the rights to an adequate standard of living, equality and non-discrimination, health, privacy and social security. And that the Australian Human Rights submission to the Community Affairs Legislation Committee inquiry expressed that this bill is regressive in the protection and realisation of the rights of people with disability, which is contrary to Australia's obligation regarding the principle of non-retrogression under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And this bill also grants sweeping new powers to the minister, reducing parliamentary oversight of key NDIS changes and limiting the ability of individuals to challenge or change decisions that affect them, and calls on the government to withdraw the bill. What did the Australian Human Rights Commission say about this bill from a rights perspective? Well, first of all, they pointed out that the government's statement of compatibility, and with legislation like this, the government has to put in place a statement about how this legislation is compatible with human rights. And there is that statement in this legislation. There's quite a long statement, no doubt drafted by bureaucrats in the department with the active ministerial oversight. And I'll tell you what that statement is. It's gaslighting. It is absolute gaslighting. And this is what the Australian Human Rights Commission says about it. The Statement of Compatibility with Human Rights does not adequately assess the human rights impacts of the bill and fails to capture its regressive effects on the rights of people with disability. While the statement identifies relevant rights, including those under the CRPD, it largely frames the bill as advancing these rights through aims such as sustainability, fraud prevention and consistency in decision-making. The framing is incomplete and misleading, as it does not meaningfully engage with the cumulative impact of the proposed amendments on the rights of people with disability. In particular, the statement does not address how the combined measures in the bill may limit the realisation of rights, including personal autonomy, the right to independent living, participation and inclusion in the community. As a result, there is insufficient evidentiary basis to support the conclusion that the bill is compatible with human rights. Without an outcomes framework that incorporates human rights indicators, it is and will continue to be difficult to assess whether the NDIS is meeting its human rights objectives or whether the proposed cost control measures amount to impermissible retrogressive human rights impacts. Well, Acting Deputy President, that's a polite way of the Human Rights Commission saying the government is lying when it says that this supports human rights. This legislation attacks human rights and attacks some of the most fundamental rights: the right to autonomy, the right to independent living, participation and inclusion in the community. That's what this legislation takes away. And when governments come in here with legislation that savages people's rights and they put this kind of tosh in it, this statement that pretends that it's consistent with human rights, that degrades faith in government. At least have the guts to say it. Have the guts and at least that small shred of integrity to not come in here and say you're doing this because you care about people with disability. You know, and you're attacking fraud because you care about people with disability. If you cared about people with disability, you would attack fraud. Because I can tell you, when I meet with the community, the strongest advocates for attacking fraud are people with disability who hate to see money set aside for the NDIS going to any kind of dodgy operators. They are the government's best and most willing supporters in attacking fraud. But you develop this package without even talking with them, without even discussing it with them. If you really wanted to attack fraud, do you know what you'd do? You'd go and meet with people with disability and say, tell me what's happening. Explain to me how the services are being provided. Come and let's co-design a system so the money goes to you when you need it. This was not co-design. This was imposed on the community because the government knew that it was never about helping people with disability. And the fraud thing, and we see it being trumpeted in the media too. The media doing the government's dirty work by frontlining fraud claims and trying to avoid the actual discussion about what it means to drive 160,000 people off the scheme. So if this was serious, if the government was serious about fraud, they'd be funding the independent commission that's meant to be chasing down and tracking down and prosecuting fraud, but no, they don't fund that. Bugger all prosecutions happening there. But you use the fraud argument as a, watch my hand scenario. Watch the fraud over here while we literally steal support from people with disability over here. And again, when politicians do this, when they come in and they gaslight the community and say this is all about fraud and integrity, when it's not about fraud and integrity at all. This is about a budget bottom line to take money out of the pockets with people with disability, take away their support services so that this government can find more money to spend on weapons and AUKUS submarines and killing and whatever Donald Trump's asked them to. And they're making that choice between people with disability and Trump's killing toys because they're too scared to take on the gas lobby and the gambling lobby and corporate Australia, which is taking a record share of our country's wealth in the form of corporate profits. We see you. We see you. And increasingly the community sees you. And when they see politics like that, is it any wonder that faith in politics is so low? I want to thank again my colleague Senator Steele-John. More of that leadership in this place. That's what we need.